friends and colleagues, it's wonderful to see so many of you. Some of you from marketing, some of you from sales, some of you are partners with each other, some of you are competitors with each other. But what you all are is very welcome. We're delighted that you've been able to make it to what is the first, and what we hope will be a series of Competitive Edge podcasts. I also want to thank our panelists, Jenna Chambers. Hi. From Demand Science, Peter Hennigan from Future Communicator. They're going to be our subject matter experts this evening. And Ed.
Hello.
And Natalie, who respectively are going to provide the kind of view from the bridge in terms of sales and marketing.
Sure.
The topics tonight are reflecting conversations that I regularly have, not only with a number of the people that are actually in the room this evening, but also consistently with many of our clients and our prospects. The first of those is how do we bridge what we think of as a demand gap? So that's how can we better blend data, media, and technology to hunt out the most valuable opportunities and successfully transition them from a marketing to a sales motion. The second, the point that we want to discuss is how do we better implement AI specifically to enable sales? In this instance, what we're going to talk about tonight is how we can effectively deploy agents to scale strategic ABM, enable us to bring a more consultative and customer-centric approach to a greater number of critical accounts. So the format for this evening is going to be, I'll spend a few minutes now just providing some context, and then we'll jump into some discussion with the panel, and we'll invite you to share back your thoughts and views. That should take about an hour, and then we'll move back next door where we can sit down for dinner, and we'd love to take that opportunity to continue the debate and the discussion and the discovery. And then we'll wrap up at the end by sharing back what we think we've consolidated in terms of a view about what we've heard and learned. There's really only one house rule for tonight, which is just please be vocal. There's no such thing as a bad idea here. It's an informal setting. I hope that you have the chance to catch up with some old acquaintances. I hope you have a chance to make some new ones. I hope that you will learn some things that you didn't know, and I hope that you'll share back some things that we don't. But most of all, what's really important for me is everyone leaves here tonight having enjoyed themselves. I think I've managed to speak to most of you, but by way of quick introduction, my name is James Mollard. I'm Growth and Strategy Director for JPC. And just in case for anyone who doesn't know us, we're a sales and marketing consultancy. We really specialize in what we feel is a unique blend of account-based and deal-based marketing, all driving towards really measurable amounts of revenue. For complete transparency, I've never hosted one of these before. I don't know whether that's getting any sympathy or it's just laying me wide open. But I've got it on good authority that it's pretty customary to start with some sort of deep and profound market insight. So I took some time to canvass some well-informed people. Some of those are in the room this evening. Some of those are your competitors. Some of those may even be your customers. And what I've done is I've gathered all of that data. I've ingested it. I've analyzed it. I've consolidated it. And generally, the consensus about the market today is it's a bit shit. But our goal tonight is to surface some ideas that will help us all thrive in 25. I did not write that. That is nothing to do with me. Yes, you can see that. Yeah. Look, whatever my job title is today, I still think of myself as being in sales. And pretty much from the point that Bath Rugby Club told me they weren't going to pay me to play rugby for them, sales just seemed like a natural home for someone that loved the kind of binary nature of win or lose. And there's a purity to me. There's a sort of purpose to it. So at the outset of my career, I'm only with my Filofax, my Ford Mondeo, and a mobile phone that was kind of like the size and the weight of a house brick. What I could do is I could get out and I could make deals happen. And it was absolutely glorious to me in its simplicity. It doesn't feel that simple anymore. And that's either in terms of making our own deals or actually sitting alongside our clients and helping them make theirs. And right now, I would suggest that, and I'm not mentioning any names, but I would suggest that unless you're sat at the apex of the Western military industrial complex and bankrolled by some of the world's smartest and richest narcissists, then I think uncovering, nurturing, and closing a deal is probably more complex, protracted, and uncertain than I've seen in the 3 decades that I've been doing it. But where's the complexity coming from? And I thought I could stand here and I could play back the Gartner and the kind of Forrester stats that we've all seen 100 times before. But I just thought it might be more interesting and useful to share what I see from a personal perspective, both in terms of trying to win business for JPC, but perhaps more interestingly for the group in the room, from the work that we've done with many of the people here, many of our other clients since COVID. So I've pulled out kind of 5 things that I think are bringing more complexity to the art of the deal. The first of those is what I think of as competitive congestion. And we're in quite a privileged position at JPC because we've got the opportunity to take a really zoomed out point of view of a lot of the biggest bids that are in the market. And from that perspective, it quite often makes me think of some of the footage I see of people queuing up to summit Everest. And they're all stood there having a jolly good time in the death zone. And it's because advances in tech, right? And the disruptive business models, they're removing barriers to entry. And we're now seeing smaller, more agile technology vendors getting shortlisted and winning big bids, bids that they wouldn't even made the long list for probably as little as 2 or 3 years ago. So businesses are having to rethink how they articulate and land their win strategies. And increasingly, that's thinking in terms of collaboration and ecosystems. That's a whole topic in itself, and we'll pick that up as a later date. But the second complexity that we're seeing is consensus-based buying decisions. Purchasing decisions in enterprises are increasingly made by committees rather than individuals. We all see that, right? I'm not telling you anything new there. And that's adding layers of complexity to the sales process. Well, I think McKinsey are quoting around saying that sort of the average decision-making unit within an enterprise organization is 6 people. I've got to be honest, the tier 1 lists that we're seeing in those kinds of pursuits are double figures every time. It's bigger than 6. It's a lot bigger than 6. And what we're seeing, what that means in terms of our clients, and I suspect some of the people in this room, is that we have to tailor value propositions. And we have to present value propositions that really do understand and address an increasingly deep and diverse set of concerns and priorities. The third one sort of plays out of the one that I've just referred to, and that's lower levels of technical expertise. And that's because as tech's democratized across business operations, buying groups are demonstrating just lower levels of technical know-how. And if I'm honest, they're demonstrating higher levels of technical so what. One of the most common challenges that we're being asked by our clients to help them solve is this idea of, help us move out of the tech conversation. We need to show up and show value to people in terms of customer experience, in terms of supply chain, in terms of governance and compliance. We have to be able to talk about the things that matter to the C-suite. But in doing that, it really takes us out of our product first comfort zone. So consequently, sales teams, there's a real imperative for them to build the cognitive and emotional intelligence that they need to communicate really complex technical concepts in accessible terms. They have to be able to foster trust and authority, importantly, amongst all the stakeholders, a really wide and diverse group of buyers. The fourth one, and this is our favorite one, the sales prevention squad, procurement. Sadly, it doesn't look like they're going to go away. And actually, it does feel like their role and their influence is kind of growing. And it's got an increasing focus on trying to define technology solutions as really as interchangeable commodities. So to counter this, we need deeper insights to help identify where and how we can bring value beyond price, and most importantly, be able to prove the claims that we make. And the final one is the impact of artificial intelligence. Sometimes it's called AI. You may have heard of it mentioned once or twice. And we're already seeing it changing marketing and sales. It's automating processes. I think most importantly, it's really commoditizing intelligence and knowledge. I think Gartner are claiming this year that 80% of B2B sales interactions are going to occur in digital channels, and many of which are going to be AI driven. To be honest, we're not seeing that as yet. But the trajectory is definitely there. We're seeing lots of AI POCs. They're in flight, but we're not seeing huge amounts of implementation at scale. That is outside of the AI that's already embedded in people's MarTech stacks. However, as we said, that the AI kind of RevOps revolution is underway, and what it is necessitating is that our teams not only adopt AI tools, but they also develop the agency to use them to influence the world around them, to affect the outcomes that they're aiming for. Again, intelligence versus agency, that's another topic that we'll come back to later in our next session. So whilst it might appear that I'm talking directly to the sales leaders in the room, I hope that the marketers feel included in this narrative as well, because more than ever, we're seeing revenue as a team sport, and the role of marketing is really transformed to meet that. So much more than brand, reach, and leads. In the last two major deals that we've worked on as JPC with our clients, marketing have been in the room from the very first interaction with that account right on up until the 11th hour, where we are wargaming the presentation that's taking place the next day that's hopefully going to close that deal. And I want to come back to the kind of military analogy that through motions like ABM, marketing are now kind of moving up from this idea of a sort of logistics support unit to a role of military intelligence. And that means that they're providing the frontline troops with the insight, with the strategy, with the tactics and the tools that they need to win the battle, to close the deal. And what we see in enterprise sales is marketing originating and orchestrating and supporting, sometimes even directing, meaningful sales dialogue, ensuring that sales professionals engage and forensically focus where and when they're going to achieve the greatest return on the investment in their deployment. So how do we put all this together? What does it mean? What does it say to me? What it says to me is that we're no longer talking about unique selling points, but we're searching for competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage is wafer thin. And to my mind, Dave Brailsford, Team GB, cycling god, 2012 Olympics, tons of golds. He summed it up perfectly when he said it's not about single race winning moments. It's about marginal gains. It's about doing 100 things 1% better. And that's what we're seeing is needed to create that competitive edge. But how does that translate into shaping and winning and game-changing deals? Recently I was speaking with a friend who's the founder of a specialist team of commercial, technical, and procurement consultants working in the network space. I imagine there's a couple of people who's guessing who that is. And he sees a lot of bids and a lot of pursuits, and he sees them from the customer side. He sees a lot. And I asked him, if you had to sum up a winning approach in one word, what would it be? Competitive, innovative, disruptive? I could see that his gut reaction was to say cheap. but once we got past that and he thought about it a bit more, the word that we landed on was intelligent. So we spent a bit of time unpacking what intelligence meant. And after some debate, we landed on two definitions in the context of winning a deal. The first of those being intelligence as the gathering and interpretation of information or data to generate actionable insights. And to our minds, what that means is getting to the heart of what truly matters and challenges the customer, and how your competitors are thinking about solving it for them, and really challenging yourself and asking yourself honestly, do you have a better solution? It's about being able to be absolutely clear about where you're going to invest your finite resources with the greatest chance of a successful return on that investment. The second version of intelligence we landed on is, we define it as the ability to learn and understand or deal with new situations through the skilled application of reason. Or in other words, how do we sell in a consultative way? How do we win the customer's trust, establish our authority, and use that position to deepen our understanding of their needs? and then use this form of cognitive intelligence to define and explain our value to the customer and to articulate our competitive advantage with absolutely unquestionable clarity. And we thought about those two definitions of deal-winning intelligence from the buyer's point of view. We thought they played well into our considerations of the challenges that we're embracing this evening. Challenge number one, sales teams have short, definitive and binary goals. And getting their commitment to nurture strategic marketing leads into opportunities. I mean, it's been a challenge since time immemorial. How do you inspire people who are measured tactically to think strategically? We think the answer is to stop trying to bend them to your way of thinking, to understand what it is they need and to deliver it. Sales teams don't ignore leads because they're lazy. Most sales teams don't ignore leads because they're lazy. They ignore them because they believe there's an alternative use of their time that actually is going to help them hit their targets more effectively. So what we're talking about today, what is the bridge that brings us from volume leads to qualified opportunities? And the second challenge is that, well, once we have those ops, how do we develop them? How do we define and embed our competitive edge? At least in our world, ABM is a methodology that's been proven through its delivery of revenue. But it requires heavy lifting. It's got research, strategy, sales and marketing collaboration, as well as a lot of significantly personalized content. It also requires a fully enabled and invested sales team, and they need the tools and tactics that help them nurture dialogue and bring them the ability to understand, to adapt, and to pivot really quickly on the fly. This for all clients, big or small, this is really prohibitive in terms of budget, but also the time to execute. So what we want to look at tonight is how could AI help us scale greater customer centricity in our pursuit of game-changing deals? And to help us discuss and find some answers for each, I'm delighted to be joined by 4 people whose experience and expertise will help add some intellectual heft and depth just to my personal experiences. You're nodding like you're going, yeah, that needs it. Thank you. So now we have the slightly awkward and cringeworthy introductions. Apologies for this. Jenna, I'll go to market. Swiss Army knife. Jenna's got a career dedicated to redefine demand generation. She's a recognized leader in ABM, go-to-market strategy and revenue acceleration. She has led or leads both marketing and sales teams and is a specialist in first-party data, intent-driven engagement, and full-funnel marketing. Peter's our AI and digital transformation strategist for the evening, leading voice at the intersection of AI, digital transformation, and strategic communications. He has got a career spanning major media and technology organizations, including the BBC, Channel 4, BuzzFeed, and also a stint at Downing Street, which that will make for an interesting dinner conversation. Right? He's helped businesses harness emerging technologies and sharpen their market position. And we have Natalie. Seasoned enterprise marketing leader with deep expertise in brand strategy, demand generation, sales alignment. And having worked across a high-growth B2B organizations, he understands the evolving role of marketing in driving commercial success, with a sharp focus on customer-centric messaging, data-driven engagement, and market differentiation. Natalie's built and led teams that turn market into a strategic growth function. And Ed, enterprise sales and commercial growth expert. That do you? Ed's an accomplished enterprise sales leader with a track record driving revenue growth, building high-performing teams, and navigating complex deal cycles. Extensive experience in B2B sales. He has developed a deep understanding of what it takes to win today's competitive landscape, balancing data relationships and execution. So on that note, let's get on with the questions and I can take a seat. Jen, if I wanted to start with you, because first off, we're gonna look at the problem statement that we have. Which sales teams are often deprioritize leads because they believe their time is better spent elsewhere. The challenge is aligning marketing efforts with sales priorities, transforming these into genuine opportunities. But the place I wanted to start is kind of giving your foot in both camps, having run marketing teams, running sales teams. going back to that idea of the role of marketing is changing, it's growing, it's shifting, it's evolving. Well, I mean, how do you see that play out? How do you see it affecting its relationship with sales and the way that it interacts and works in the pursuit of revenue?
Well, I think that there's an assumption that salespeople are not following up on those leads and not kind of at that early stage because their time is best spent closing deals. But I actually think sometimes it's just experience. Like the first 10 leads I got from sales or the first 20 leads I got from sales, I phoned them, they didn't pick up, they weren't that interested. And so actually it's their experience that has taught them to say that actually this is not a good use of time, as opposed to not actually being a good use of time. And so I think that's where that kind of, and we've all spoken about this for many years, this is not anything new. But this idea that marketing is bleeding a bit more towards sales and sales is kind of bleeding a bit more towards marketing, and that kind of team sport thing means it's not that weird handoff point of like, I've hit my number and handed them over, and then if they don't convert and something doesn't go well, then it's sales' fault. I think if both sides are responsible for the whole way through kind of that, what was the funnel, now is kind of more of the bow tie, then I think it just fundamentally changes the game. Like I think most marketers now are so much more commercially savvy than maybe they ever were before. And most sales teams, I think, no longer just kind of sit and go, marketing hasn't got me enough leads. It's kind of like we've kind of moved on from that point. And I think most successful salespeople are actually very good marketers because they're out there, they're building their own brand reputation and they're starting to develop their own relationships. They're understanding that, okay, somebody might not be ready to buy today, but I need to start a relationship. And that's kind of what marketing helps them do as well. So I think a bit more appreciation exists now from both sides.
Yeah. I mean, Natalie, is that something that you see on the other side of the fence?
Yes, it is actually. And we had our quarterly business review last week, actually.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice thing to sit in the room and say, we've had nobody from sales moan about marketing.
Right. Okay.
In terms of delivering good opportunities to engage and follow up.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily quantify a lead or a qualified lead.
Yeah.
What we actually do is provide opportunities to be accepted by sales, and it's fine if they don't. And then look at how they convert them and nurture them through the sales cycle. So yeah, we're finding that there is a mutual appreciation. And I think what Jen said about marketing becoming more commercially aware, it's definitely something that I think the marketing industry needs to focus on.
Just to come back to something you said there about sort of, we're giving them opportunities, not leads. How do you define the difference?
We don't. That's the problem. Because no one can agree what a lead means currently in my organisation. I also think it depends on the type of organisation you work in.
Yeah.
So currently I'm in a software business, so very volume, lead orientated.
Yeah.
Previously, when you work in a large SI, you wouldn't talk about leads. Yeah, because it's all enterprise businesses and you're talking, big sales cycles, big deals. So I think what we currently do at Pega is that we have growth campaigns running, which are a demand gen function, basically. And we do the air cover, and then it comes into region and we drive that into our enterprise accounts. But in terms of the air cover, we have something that is fundamental to our business called a blueprint, which is based on workflow automation.
Yeah.
We encourage people to do a blueprint, because they will then realise how they can transform their business at the touch of a button. Once we get that blueprint, that then leads us on to hand over to sales, follow that through the sales cycle. And that is the narrative that has been run through the business probably for the last 5 months, and it's working.
Yeah.
And we have a 23 million pipe target on that.
Yeah. Great.
So,
I mean, Ed, in your experience, you've worked for massive global SI. You're working for a software company now. What's the sales view of that?
Well, we have a team that does that. And I take your point around when you're looking after big accounts, for example, so you're either in hunting, and there's a differentiation between the two, of course. You have some organizations that employ people that do both, and I think generally speaking, that's wrong because the hunting will take a back seat. There's so many different points around this, but I think I have an opinion that salespeople should phone any lead that comes their way. right? That's just my thing. I'm from the school where the night before we had to write down 200 numbers from the yellow pages, no names, and literally phone 200 numbers the next day and off you go. But there are people from a different school, and I appreciate it. So at an enterprise level, you might be looking after and doing and have triple pipeline, whatever the case is, and you really probably don't have time. But as an organization, you still need to make time to phone those leads. I think it's unacceptable that leads aren't followed up on, for example. Okay. However, salespeople will say, well, I don't know what I'm phoning here, or it's not qualified, or what am I meant to be saying here? This is just something that's limited in information, for example. So sometimes they'll stop short and they'll move on to the next thing, whatever the case is. So that's normally a breakdown in the workflow or the process, which I think is most of the issues when it comes to the sales and marketing or the generation of leads at that particular level. Now, at the other level, the sort of not the bottom necessarily, but the other level where you've got P times V, for example, then of course you would expect everyone to follow up on leads and do the necessary whatever the case is, because that's the nature of the business. You're selling a product and a service. At a enterprise level, then I understand sometimes the excuses, but still I often think that there's no real excuse for not phoning a lead.
I kind of see, as a salesman, I sort of see that point. Because if someone's suggesting to me, get in contact with this person, I expect some insight. I want some information about it. And Jenna, I'd be really interested in your view in terms of where and how you feel that marketing can go to generate those kinds of insights and kind of avoid the yellow page moment.
Thankfully that's gone, but
doesn't feel like that long ago. I think there's something to do with like SDRs kind of plugging that gap as well in terms of something comes inbound and it's not necessarily as binary as kind of does the salesperson follow up or doesn't it, but like a salesperson who could be focused on closing revenue for sure is maybe not a best use of their time to spend hours and hours and hours just getting on a call just to dequalify. And so then kind of the role of SDRs at that point to say, okay, yes, there's enough here to either warrant a conversation and we'll get a salesperson involved, or there's not actually enough here to warrant a conversation right now, but this person is of interest and we as a business should keep a relationship with them, and that becomes kind of a nurture opportunity at that point. And then I think what you were hinting at was around the idea of like insights and data and kind of being able to go to like places where you can start to do that qualification digitally and easily as well, and start to see, okay, is this an account that to us looks completely cold and they've come inbound and, maybe they're not quite ICP and maybe they're not quite the right persona, plus there's no signals. Okay, maybe we'll send an email.
Yeah, so things like Sales Navigator, for example, and there's loads of other tools as well, but they'll tell you what the insights are. Yeah. If your company does obviously invest in that type of software. So often that should accompany a lead that comes through the system, for example, as well. Or the salesperson is, as part of his practice, should go and interrogate Sales Navigator or whatever it is that they're using, to be able to get an idea of what the conversation might look like, for example, if you do happen to get online with whomever it is,
So, I mean, we've started to do that. So we actually sell AI. So we should eat our own dog food. And
a number of people.
So actually what happens is they get a prompt from the CRM system. They get all of the download of the information. And then we're actually trialing our internal agentic AI solution, and they can use the prompts that we give them through what we call Coach, which again is AI, and they can start to look at tailoring their personal outreaches, get the insight on the account, right down to the content creation. So that takes away that marketing element of the cycle and allows us to be more strategic, to then focus on the enterprise accounts, which are the bigger deals, the bigger growth. I think the challenge we're finding is getting sales to adopt it. Because it's like anything that's shiny and new. Sometimes I don't want to go near it. I like the old way that I do things, etc. So it's about monitoring that adoption all the time.
Yeah.
The other way we're supporting them as well is that they have their AI tools that they can go and do their research, their data crunching. Is actually providing them a self-service level of deliverables. So they can now create their own landing pages. So once they've crafted their outreach, they can actually go and create an org page with all the other supporting evidence on it and so on. And then there's other documents as well that they can create. And they can do that using AI. So it's literally in their hands. And talking about the alignment between sales and marketing, what we have done recently is align the ops function. So we work off the same KPIs, the same dashboard, and everything. It's becoming more and more common. I would say more in a software business. There's always a few little debates, but it is generally working in terms of those two functions coming together. There'll always be a love and hate Marmite relationship between sales and marketing, but it's definitely closing. And sales wanting to engage more rather than just resisting it completely, I would say.
The only other thing I'd say is around how sales teams are made up.
Yeah.
And you can probably split it into, you can argue on this, but 2 or 3 different types of salespeople. You'll have the guys that blow their target every year and don't follow one process under the sun.
Yeah. And you leave them to it. And you leave them to it.
Guilt is charged. But and then it depends on leadership. So how they manage, for example, because you can't manage them out of the system, they're too successful. Yeah. You'll have a bigger middle batch, whatever that is, 60% or whatever the case is. Yeah. And they'll generally follow process, but they won't shoot the lights out, whatever the case is. And then you'll have whatever it is at bottom 10, 15%. So I think often across a team or an organization, you have to grapple with that when it comes to implementing systems and stuff like that as well.
I think there's something to be said for like the push-pull as well. Like I think if you're trying to like constantly push things on sales team, like none of us like being told what to do. And so there is that kind of natural kind of resistance of kind of, oh, I'd rather not. Whereas if you can make it more of a pull motion, like find 1 or 2 that are more likely to kind of, be open and or maybe have had experience doing it a different way in the past, and kind of you can have success with them to the point that you get the salespeople coming to you going, well, you're doing it for that girl or that guy. Like, why are you not doing it for me? That's where I found in the past that you've actually affected that change, as opposed to constantly trying to push it on them. It never really goes very well.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd say, it's a cultural thing as well. So, and culture for me always starts at the top. So unless it's driven at a certain, so for example, all data or all pipeline information is produced out of a system, not on Excel, not on paper, whatever the case is. That'll only work properly if it's driven from the top. In other words, it's not acceptable to come to a meeting unless it is driven out of Salesforce or Oracle or whatever the case is. Yeah. Now that is often a good starter for things like this to go the step further and be useful in the organization. Yeah. There's nothing worse for a salesperson than doing something that has no value whatsoever. And often these bits and pieces represent that to them, unless they're either shown, not told, but shown, or
the context,
or they can see how useful it can be, for example, or how much money it can make them, or whatever the case is. Yeah, it's been going on for years, but there's no one size fits all. But yeah, lots of factors.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the tools that we can enable salespeople with on marketing. I'm just interested around kind of third-party intent bits and people's view on that. If people have worked with it, what kind of experiences they've had with that.
I mean, that's how I know you, right? Back in the day, like, yeah.
It's not loaded, by the way.
Yeah. I think the thing with third-party intent is to understand that it is, it's beneficial and it is helpful, but it's not a silver bullet. And I think especially, if you have one single source, like that is not going to be the go, no go. It's like one of multiple signals. And if you start to stitch together like as many first and third party signals as you possibly can, so you start to get the nuance. So you're actually starting to interpret that data rather than it be a, kind of like one person kind of surged on one word and you're like, okay, this entire account is ready to buy tomorrow. Of course, that's not going to happen. But then it can get really complicated, right? The more signals you pull in, the harder it then gets to interpret them, because then you're just kind of getting blasted with a whole amount of noise. And so I think it's kind of important to do the work up front to figure out, what is meaningful for us from a signal perspective, and have that modeled out first, and then have all your signals come in and go through that criteria before you then act on it or not. Otherwise, again, like, the salespeople I think are going to get annoyed. Like marketing's told them this account's leaning in because of one signal. They pick up the phone and they're like, why are you calling me? I've got no, like this just doesn't resonate. And again, it's like handing over a lead that's not going to work out. It has the same impact.
So it's one part of a bigger picture that you have to pull together. You have to for.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say it's part of the intelligence and research kit.
Yeah.
Just one element of it.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, buying units are much, much bigger. So it's like, well, ops has come in, okay, but they may have a just slightly different need to finance, for example, versus somebody who runs a call centre. So,
and from your experience, how good are businesses as a sales organisation in utilising their own data, not third party? I mean, I'm just thinking it will remain nameless, but one project we worked on and just trying to get data from the organisation was a challenge.
Yeah, that's a bad example, but
I think there's a number of people who probably guess who it is.
Jamie, I mean, there's good and there's bad.
Yeah.
I think generally, I think that probably the bar is quite low in my opinion. I've not worked for an organisation that's ever had a fully fledged shared services site that has all the use cases, all the, I can go there, I can interrogate it. The one I'm with right now actually has just applied AI to their version of their internal information. And it's actually amazing what you can interrogate and obviously get out of it and produce individual documents for, as opposed to having to go and find the one you think retrofits what it is that you need and all that kind of good stuff. So there are ways to do it, but I've not worked for an organization that's ever really got that right. I think the bar is quite low, in my opinion. I mean, people may have different opinions, but with we can't use AI for everything in this day and age, but I have started to see how AI in its interrogation, how it can pull information, can start to make a big difference there.
At that point, I just wanted to open it out to the people in the audience and just try and get a different perspective or an agreeing perspective on the progression of the relationship between marketing and sales, and what is it that marketing can provide to sales in your environment that they're not currently providing today? What else could they do to actually help sales more in that pursuit of revenue? Any thoughts from anyone?
Sound like a sales person to be.
Well, I've been talking about. I mean, I know what we want to do. We're just not doing it right now. For me, it's the automation of it all. It's actually linking up all the systems. We've got the tools. They're just not all talking to each other at the moment, and therefore it's very heavy lifting to do anything. And that's on our roadmap to do. It's just have we got the skills and the people to make it happen. So the Sales Navigator integrated the CRM, is Lusher integrated, and then now employing some new SDRs. That for me is a real nugget of happiness, because I've finally got somebody who's got the patience to do the nurture, who are so supercharged with AI knowledge and all the tools, and they know how to do it, and they're hungry, rather than some of the more traditional salespeople I might have in my organisation. I like some of the people that you described, but it's really exciting. So for me, it's the automation of things and the technology, and marketing's leading on that.
Yeah,
to be fair. We don't do it, no one's going to do it.
The idea of it's always going to be, in my opinion, it's always going to be overseen by social interactions, etc. And I think the concept of people who are being trained or young in the business, or I think SDI is what you refer to, is a really, really good breeding or starting place to get that right within teams. Can work quite well.
James, sorry, you're going to make a point.
Yeah, what was I was to say that I think it's all down to the definition of the lead, to the marketing definition of the lead, and the sales.
Correct.
And the SDR function does kind of bridge that gap. Because probably one of the other people in the room, sort of like there's been a campaign online, and so you just get a list of leads who just clicked on the report or the findings. I mean, that's just someone who's just picked up the leaflet off a counter. Like that's not a lead.
My view on that is they will probably be measured, their KPIs, on volume versus quantity, which is what salespeople want. So there is this conflict, which is still goes on right now.
You're absolutely right. And there will
Yeah.
be nuggets in there,
Yeah.
right? So sure, but it's, it depends on who you get to kind of warm up that lead or qualify that lead. And that's not necessarily a salesperson, right? You don't want your sort of like home-paid, highly skilled salespeople sort of churning through a million numbers and just qualifying things out. And the SDR function does bridge the gap. I mean, the SDR function does sort of like find that extra level of qualification and then find an extra level of warm leads being handed over to sales. There's still a bit of nurturing, there's still a bit of like relationship building. But it's warm leads rather than just naming number. A book of your age being slapped in front of the salesperson.
As long as the person or the lead is not a decision maker, I think that process is fine. In the sense that you want your best person to be speaking to whomever that lead is, if that makes sense. Then yeah, I'd agree.
There's definitely something though, like around that measurement piece that you just mentioned. I've been on the receiving end the last month. I've clearly hit somebody's threshold of something and I'm ICP, and I have just been hounded by this SDR to the point that the phone rang the other day and I don't actually know how they got hold of my number because it's delisted on everything. And I was just so overwhelmed that I was just a bit like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll take the meeting. It was such a waste of everybody's time because I took the meeting because I kind of felt like I should. And I knew I should have said no. I kind of got caught a bit unawares and I got on a call and he brought his AE and his AE's like, okay, you're going to hit my pipeline. I'm like, I'm really not. And then, at the end, I had to be like, I'm so sorry. And like I set the expectation at the start of the call, but just imagine how much time has been spent and wasted on that.
I was at a CRO conference on Wednesday, and there was a guy there that ran a big kind of outsourced BDR agency, and said, if you have a BDR team, he said, find the 3 or 4 young people that are excelling. He said, because I can guarantee they will be using tools and technology that you have no idea about to make themselves successful. He said, go and mine their expertise, figure it out, and bring that back into your wider team. That they might not want to tell you.
They're using
He said
AI.
you might not like the answer.
Yeah.
They're all using AI, and
Yeah.
a lot of them, which I'm really surprised about, they've literally started 2 weeks ago. They've gone back to calling.
Yeah.
So where everybody stopped calling because of COVID and everybody was at home, they say that that's still the most. I'm like, how many people do I hang the phone down to? And yet but they need the insight and they need the AI to open the conversation. They've got that 5 seconds to bring some into a meeting. You're good. You're a good
Hearing
target.
AI quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a start point, but I mean, what's been the kind of big, exciting kind of game changers for you that you've seen in the space that the things that just blown your mind over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I'll come to that, but just touching on some of the conversations here.
Yeah.
There's a book that I read called The Barcelona Way. I'm a huge football fan. And Pep Guardiola, now at Manchester City, he built this incredible kind of team, which they worked sort of synergetically together. And what I'm hearing here is that there's a real kind of, there's a need for the marketeers. And like I'm a communicator, so I'm one further back from that. I'm not selling anything, but ultimately I kind of am in a way. They're kind of working synergetically together. And there's a blurring, it's not like you score goals and you set up goals, like it's all interplaying. And I think that's the kind of new world we're certainly entering into. And it means that the structure has to be different. It means that you have to build almost like a joint brain at the center of your organizations. And everybody seems to have access depending on the tooling. And then that allows you to work much more closely together. And that's how when I look at AI, I'm almost going back to, the age of steam and electricity when it first arrived. People didn't quite know what to do with it. So they had these big machines and they didn't know how to plug it in the factories properly. And I think we're still in that place at the moment where we've got this unbelievably, like some of the stuff you've just been speaking about. I want to talk to you afterwards. I want to figure that all out. There's just new ways that we've never thought of working before, where we use automation more than ever. The thing that really jumps out at me is probably in the last few weeks, really, deep research. So you basically, and it's where sales and marketeers can work really close together. You can just ask it a prompt about any subject. It comes back 10 minutes later, like at almost no cost, with 30 to 60 reference points and a full marketing report. mean, that would have taken somebody a week or a month to do in the past, can be done in seconds. So having that level of knowledge is terrifyingly brilliant, but it is challenging.
I mean, it's interesting what you're saying, because I mean, from an ABM perspective, that sort of one-off strategic ABM, the two big budget burners are just the amount of time and human resource that it takes to get this stuff up and running. And the areas that most applies to, as we see it anyway, is the setup. Is how do you get to insights that are deep enough, meaningful enough for you to be able to start to construct a strategy that's unique to that account. And then at the other end of it, how are you able to mass produce cost effectively really highly personalized pieces of content and tools and assets for your sales team?
Yeah, I was going to say, James, that's where you absolutely need to get the team working hand in glove, because you'll get some insight if you're a marketeer and you think that's fantastic. The salesperson will know that's not going to cut the mustard. Like, so the fact that if they can work closer together early enough through the whole process, that's when you're going to have the most success, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Sure.
So, well, I agree, because from a one-to-one ABM perspective, when we kick off an account, we wouldn't start unless we had an account plan. So we then go away, do the research, and then we go in and we do a deep dive workshop. My colleague has just done one yesterday. And within that, we actually then start to use AI and educate the salespeople on how to prompt. And I think using AI is about how you do the prompts to get what you need out of it. And it takes a little bit of practice. But they were actually, in one of the workshops that I went into, creating vision proposals within 10 minutes, because we were educating them on the prompts, and they were really amazed at the powerful content that was coming back and the richness of it, as well as the personalization.
Yeah.
So it is going to save time, but you still need that human element.
Definitely. I'd say, I always use this phrase, I'm a data scientist, but I'm not a data scientist.
Yeah.
I'm a salesperson, but I'm not a salesperson. Like, all those things blur because the technology allows it. In the past, you had to be really deep expertise in one area. Now you can be almost a T-shape. So deep in one specific, you might be a salesperson or a marketeer, but you're kind of wide in all those other areas as well.
Yeah. But what happens then when we're all using AI and actually intelligence is just completely
Well,
to
your point around how do you differentiate yourself, which you, as you said, is becoming, it's always been difficult, but it's also becoming more difficult as well. And I think you often have to go back to the softer points of sales. So you have to be hugely energized. You have to be paranoid about the deal set that you have on the table at the time. You have to be easy to do business with, which is basically not making it hard for the customer to come back, all those good things. And I think they start to become differentiators. And when you lack some of those things, is when you sometimes fall behind in deal cycles. Yeah.
That's about creating an experience, isn't it? It's not actually.
They say, how do you make the customer feel? How did he feel when he got off the phone with you? And if you can't answer that positively, then. Yeah.
Peter, we've spoken before, we're working on things about this idea of 20-60-20.
Yes.
How does, explain for people what we were thinking with that.
Yeah, it's like everyone in this room is a deep expert in their own domain. And this is mainly, I use this when I'm going into organizations who, some people are really excited about AI, but there's a huge cohort who are scared. They're like, this could impact my job. Or I don't know how to use the technology. So the approach is to go in and audit and then go, okay, 20% up front, that's your expertise, spend more time on that, build out the prompts, and it might be a bunch of tools, or it might be a ChatGPT, it depends on the business. And then it's 60% AI doing its thing. And then it's back to you as the expert, the marketeer, the salesperson, to finesse it or fine tune, as we call it, and then get the result out the door. And I think loosely around that, where people get it wrong is they go, right, I'll do a little prompt. Boom, we've got this big chunk of data or information, and then I'll just chuck it out. That's awful, because it's like 5%, 90%, 5%. Like, that's just, we're experts for a reason. And I think the challenge will be younger people coming in. They'll have the technical skills, but they won't have the lived experience skills. And getting those two rights is probably the biggest challenge, I think, going forward.
I'm just interested, sort of a show of hands from the audience around who whose businesses actually have defined budget set aside for investing in exploring research and development around AI, specifically as it relates to revenue creation? Who thinks it's enough? Yes. And I suppose that, Peter, from your perspective, again, and what's coming down the pipe that we should be looking at? So if we've got some money set aside, saying we are going to invest this, it is focused on revenue generation. What sort of things do you think we should be looking at? You mentioned deep research.
I think the biggest thing is staff training.
Okay.
Because if staff haven't got the training, your sales, your marketing experts already, if you don't, it's training, but it's also the incentive. There's a kind of like, you need to have incentive, you need to have a clear plan, train, the right tooling. If you don't line them up successfully, the whole thing falls apart. So if they're not incentivized and you've all the tooling in the world, and you get this a lot, I've worked with a lot of companies in the legal profession, and they've said to everyone, you've all got Copilot, but they've done no training. So nobody uses it. Or they give half the team all the tools and the other lot just the most basic, and there's a disconnect. So I think at the moment, for me, that would be the first thing, get the training sorted. And then it's more in this kind of agentic space, which is still to be worked out. It's where AI is talking to AI, doing clever stuff in a magic box. And then I'm still trying to get my head around some of where this is all going. But that's where we need to watch out. But I think getting the good basics, any company, is probably the first starting point. And having clean data, I know we've spoken about this a lot. If you can clean up your data at the center, it means you can do clever stuff. The problem is it's all siloed in different parts of the business. So that idea of the brain is the clean data at the center with tooling around it.
I think to pick something with our work with you, Peter, as well, that struck me particularly as a small business, with the governance and frameworks around how, so it's training, but it's also giving our people really clear parameters. I think there's still quite a lot of fear around it. A couple of people in our team still sort of say, oh, but I don't know if I can do that research in this tool because I don't know what I'm giving away. There's still some of that. And it's certainly, as a business owner, I know we're quite preoccupied with making sure we are being really, really safe with it as well. So I think when you combine governance with training and that human element, then you're really starting to build the confidence to, do more independently.
Can I ask a question? You talked about using our learned experiences and our expertise. But over here we've got, and I've got the same examples, SDRs who don't have learned experiences because they've been using AI since they left school. We have some, but not really in the context that we're considering. How do we prepare for agentic to agentic, like vendor selection, right? As sellers and marketers, where buyers aren't going to use their learned experience to make a purchase decision. I'm curious, Peter, what you think as the expert on the panel?
That's scary.
That does slightly terrify me, where it's AI talking to AI and humans are almost cut out of the loop. I mean, there will be some that do that. I almost think there's going to be this kind of, I'm probably going to swerve the question slightly.
Let's assume it's a human still in the loop. But there's a human querying AI to decide where to even go look. And then there's a human using AI to decide how to pitch. Right? I mean, that funnel gets pretty narrow pretty quick when they're going into an agent to ask for a recommendation.
It does, yeah. And I'd say that's where we go back to the human. I really believe that the superpower of leadership going forward, and in sales and in marketing, is going to be people who have just great interpersonal skills. Networking, the softer skills become more important, because if it's technology talking to technology with a bit of human on either side, they're just getting AI talking to AI in the middle. And then it just becomes, I mean, it might be good information. Well, I don't know, it just loses.
I mean, maybe you don't have a point of view on this, maybe somebody else does. But what about ways to make sure your information is available to the AI model, so you're actually found in the same way that we do, maybe SEO or paid search today? Because I feel like that's going away to some extent.
Well, putting good information into the model?
Like, how, as a brand, If we assume no one searches using Google anymore.
Word is the thing.
Yeah.
And you know, it's genuine stuff coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you even get it? Make sure that you're available.
That's really,
Yeah.
If they can access the whole internet, like it used to be SEO, how do you get ranked on Google? Now, how do you effectively get ranked in AI?
If it goes from recommending 20 restaurants to recommending the one, and maybe nobody's got a point of view, it scares the shit out of me, but yeah.
Pretty simple ones, just websites disappear.
Great.
yeah.
Well, I mean, if you've got a smart agent representing your interests.
Oh, look at that.
No.
Back in 1918, we were trying to sell websites, and now
We have to do it again. But you're right, it is scary because I was telling some of the JPC guys before we started, we have an internal agentic AI assistant. And we're all trialing it, but using it. So we're feeding it stuff all the time, right? It's like a, raptor that just wants to eat everything. It is. But the PR director was obviously using, we call it intern Iris. I'm allowed to say it externally because our CMO has. And was talking to Iris. I love the fact it's a woman, being International Women's Day last week. Anyway, so he was talking to Iris and he was obviously prompting, learning to prompt, etc. Started flirting back to him. I mean, that's really scary. So Iris is learning that emotional empathy type feeling thing. Now that is really quite scary. And this has only been running Pippa 3 months?
So
Iris?
basically, if that was an external product, it'd be flirting with your customers.
Well, that could be good.
How do you, or not. But back to how do you control that? How do you control that? How do you know that that's a real person or not a real person? I mean, because if as a company, if we start to put that into the channels, for example, when you're applying for a mortgage, and Iris comes back and goes, "Hey," I mean, you'd be like, "What the hell?" I mean, but that could potentially happen. That's scary.
I think controls, they call guardrails, all these things are really, really key. I fear it's going to go that way, though. I mean, have you heard the Grok unhinged mode? Has anyone heard it?
No.
It's crazy. I'm not going to go into it, but it literally swears back at you and the whole story. And then there's a mental health mode. There's so I think at that level, it's going to go that way. But then it comes down to guardrails, controls, governance, stuff like that.
And there's sort of like small language models designed specifically to that. So I'm working with a client in Qatar, and you'll put in clear rules of what's culturally allowed and what's not allowed in that country in case it ends up.
She's called an intern. But yeah, you're right. You have to.
But they're getting better at actually analysing so it's almost like it's between the prompts and the end results. So it will analyse it, give a kind of rating on if it's good enough to go out or not.
Okay.
So that's...
So you've all emphasised you've moved on to the guardrails, and that's great. But you both emphasised the importance of the human touch, and you emphasised the importance of the human touch in everybody else. And I absolutely agree with that. Now, I speak of genuinely love AI. I really enjoyed it. It was like I want to throw one thing at you, which is 0 out of 10, 0 to 10. Genuinely, as individuals, how much would you trust agentic AI right now to take on a chunk of something you were doing?
I do an 8.
You do an 8.
I could. In our company at the moment, we can devise campaigns within an hour, and have the asset pop out. So,
Would you send it without reviewing them?
no.
No.
No. But
Do you have a content background?
do I have a content background? No. But the
Because
thing
all
is,
CMOs and content backgrounds are horrified at the thought of even starting with AI.
but the thing is, it's easier to start with something than a blank sheet of paper. And then it would take a week to brief, to write the brief, to etc. If we had something that we can then hand over and say, this is where put your human brain on it, we're finding it much better.
So accelerated production, absolutely,
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
But letting go and saying, I will hit, hitting send on the email without me.
So Pippa can give you an example.
I just think that you have to have thresholds, controls and stuff like that for agentic to work properly. Otherwise, it will go AWOL. You have to have that. And we're doing development of that right now with vendor processing, for example, in the finance space. And unless you have those, whatever it is, then that obviously oversee, or that human oversee type factor is it can't work. It can't work in any other way right now anyway. So the answer to the question would be no, 100% no, unless you have that human oversight.
That's what I say, the 20-60-20. You're back to the 20%, the oversight, the expertise. And if it's production, you know, if you're a good producer of content, you go, that's not quite right. It's not hitting the mark, that kind of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't, I always say never, ever put anything out that's AI direct. Yeah. It's in between, and it's the starts the process, speeds it up, that kind of thing.
Great. This is, I'm going to move the conversation to dinner now, because it's just hotting up and you guys are looking hungry. So I think it's back to that door, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's a huge thanks to our panel.
Thank you.